All right, good afternoon and welcome to the second of a three-part series brought to you by City.AI Orange County. We are a new chapter and today marks our third event. We want to thank every one of you for joining us. A little background on City.AI Global. Since its inception, the organization has engaged over 26,000 AI industry professionals with the help of over 200 volunteer ambassadors. Many of them are here with us today and we want to show special thanks to those ambassadors in Orange County. As you can see, we have a great group of folks who've been involved. Thank you for that, John. And we also would like to say a special thanks to our diamond sponsor, Technossus, who has been instrumental in bringing City.AI to Orange County. Now, folks, we expect this to be a very interactive discussion featuring three distinguished leaders, each of whom has a unique perspective on artificial intelligence and what contactless AI means to us. Along the way, though, we'll be taking questions from you, our audience. So please be ready. It's not going to be one of those where you've got to hold your question till the very end. We're actually going to have different break points where we're going to be reaching out to you, asking for your feedback as well. Now, in our session last month, we explored the challenges and opportunities associated with the adoption of new solutions in light of our current landscape. Today, we'd like to push that discussion a little bit further and look at companies who are actually using AI solutions to address challenges in a few different environments. In the flexible workspace, disease detection through wearables, AI-enabled COVID tracking devices, and water management tracking. Now, this webinar is going to be divided into those four distinct areas, and we're going to discuss a specific company or a theme, and then again, open it up to all of you for questions. So as you think of a question you'd like to ask, please raise your hand and we will get to you as soon as we can. And now I'd like to introduce our distinguished panelists, each of whom has a unique perspective here. They're also Orange County City.AI ambassadors, starting with Al Brown, who is the Senior Vice President of Engineering, Data Science, and Architecture for Veritone. We've got Joseph K. Hopkins, thought leader in AI, authentication, and security technologies, and he's also the pioneer behind the IPRESTIGE Emerge Fund. And finally, we have Martin Prescher, the founder and managing director of PwC's Consumer Finance Innovation Center. He also has his PhD in artificial intelligence and machine learning, which makes him our resident doctor of AI. We're going to start with the topic of hoteling. Now, last month we touched on this. We're going to play a little video and then we'll discuss it. Okay, so I don't know if you guys got a chance to take a look at the news yesterday, but WeWork announced that they've got a new CFO, their second in the last 6 months. That said, in a recent quote, the CEO of WeWork said they were pretty bullish about where this flexible workspace is heading, looking ahead to 2021. Al, this is an area that you know quite a bit about, and I want to ask you, where do you see this trend?
Yes, thank you. So I find this really, I'm very curious about what's going to happen and how COVID actually impacts all of our operations, whether they're people operations or hoteling with the business space. As you know, I mean, in Orange County, almost all of our offices have been closed. And so right now, we're not using as much of that office space. And so you can see this through what's happening with Regis and WeWork. So WeWork announced a new CFO. We have Regis that's restructuring. And what's really happening is some of the companies, and ours included, are looking at how do we actually restructure our environment to be more hoteling centric. So how do we actually support more ad hoc use cases where people are generally working remote or working contactless through the internet with each other. But when appropriate, when are they going back into the office to actually have those larger meetings or those sessions, and how to actually do that and safe. part of that, we actually have AI solutions that are coming out to actually help keep and monitor these environments to actually make them safer. So that way we're starting to use AI to count how many people are coming into an office space, look at how close they are for social distancing, look at whether or not they're actually being safe using masks, monitoring more of the cleanliness of what's actually happening, including air monitoring and things like that. And so I am very curious of how this adapts. I do think that Evo Nexus and others and hoteling will be actually a big part of this as people realize they don't need as much office space, with everybody or a lot of people still choosing to work remote as compared to being in the office. And I would love to hear some questions and comments, and I have more to say if you want me just to talk, but I'd actually like to make it interactive.
Oh, and we do too. And I know we've got some folks who are definitely going to be trying to jump in here in a second. But to that end, let's expand on that a little bit more, Al. I know you had mentioned that there are some technologies that you are looking at. I mean, when we think of the term, and I'll be honest, it was a new term for me. When I think of hotels, I think of a place where I'm going to go stay overnight, right? But in this particular context, obviously, you're making a reservation to sit at a desk or in an office space. What kinds of AI is being used or technologies are being used to kind of limit that contact that people might be having with one another? Because I know in the traditional model, pre-COVID, you'd walk up to that reception area, you'd check in, and then you'd have access to the space. So what's changed?
So what's really changed is more of the AI technology that we're starting to bring to bear. And that includes from automatically getting away from key badges and actually doing face recognition on the doors to let you in if you're an employee. So that way you don't actually have to touch the handles, which is actually a contagion point, to actually walking in and resizing the space so that the desks are further away. So hoteling in different companies in the past have been usually long tables or a set of cubes together. This is spreading them out so that people are 6 feet away or at least 2 meters away from each other so they can be a bit safer. We are starting to also leverage AI to enforce various, or at least report on various policies that we want to enforce, such as social distancing, whether people are wearing masks. Again, we want to make sure that everybody is safe as they actually get back into the office, and that everybody can feel comfortable while we can still actually conduct business and actually meet in person to actually do those high value conversations.
And I know there is some liability involved in that too, and that's an area that you guys are also looking at, because in this new environment, obviously, employers are having to pay special attention to make sure that the health and safety of their employees still remains number one, but there are a lot of little layers to that, and just wanted to kind of get some feedback from you on that before we do open it up to others.
Absolutely. So this goes a little bit broader than hoteling. But companies right now, especially if you look at music and sports events where you have a large set of people coming together to an event, you have to actually you don't want to be negligent. You want to take as much proactive steps as you can to actually ensure that all of those people are as safe as possible. And that's really where we can start leveraging things as AI. And that really goes back to what I said around social distancing, checking the temperature, things like that, as people are using your facility. So that way you are taking all the steps and you can actually show that you are actually taking proactive actions to keep everybody safe, that people aren't having temperatures while they're at the facility, that people are staying apart, that people actually are wearing the masks, and that you are taking action when they are not. And we don't know what's going to happen with legislation. It's something that I'm interested in, and what they will do around the COVID legislation, whether or not people will be liable or not. But that is something that will happen through the courts over the next few years. And again, for the best foot forward for the companies is to do all those proactive steps so that they can actually make sure they're doing everything they can to keep everybody safe.
Now we have a gentleman, and I'm going to try and pull him in. And full disclosure, this is fairly new technology to us. We're giving this a new try here at City.AI. But we've got a gentleman who works in the risk department from Gallagher. Which, as you can imagine, is a big insurance company, and they are pretty well versed in a lot of the other nuances. I'm going to try and pull him in because I know he had some interesting perspectives as well. So give me a second here. All right, I think we've got Kevin.
Hey, I'm sorry, I don't know why you can't see my face here, but yeah, thanks for having me. It's pretty, artificial intelligence, what we're seeing has been a huge impact, and Gallagher has been a pioneer by investing a lot of, hundreds of millions of dollars, because what we're seeing is it definitely helps by classifying the risk and by overall underwriting. And the power of that is you can see more trends and be more proactive. And so a lot of our insurers, meaning the carriers, they are doing the same thing. But when it comes to with these new COVID exposures, obviously the insurance marketplace, we're definitely in a hard marketplace. The workers' comp through the presumption that we're seeing, where if anybody in California is working and contracts the COVID case, it could become a workers' comp claim. So what is the strategy? What are we tracing? And so we're actually using AI to help trace these claims, so that way when we're going into the next year's renewal place, where you could say, well, wait a minute, you projected the COVID cost, but by our facts and our data, here's the ultimate total payout by this, which ultimately reduces your overall cost. But again, with COVID, you're going to see a lot new exposures. Unfortunately, with the cyber area, when you have people working at home or doing the hoteling, you're seeing a lot of points of entry where these hackers know and they could get through the gates, right? So how are we protecting all of our employees at home? And at the same time, they're not used to working in their regular workstations. So how are we going to stop from the workers' comp perspective on your ergonomics and those workers' comp claims from home? So again, that's just a small touch as far as what's going on, how we're using AI, and how it's been very effective.
Fantastic, Kevin. Thank you for that. Al, any thoughts on that?
I think it's going to be very interesting, and I'm very glad that insurers are actually starting to track and monitor this. And AI is a huge part of underwriting and insurance. So
yeah, and just to chime in real quick on this, what I find very interesting about these use cases is from now a conceptual AI perspective, right? Is that you need a variety of data sources that you bring together to come to the right answer, right? And there might even be optimization problems that you're needing to solve, like for claims, optimal return or whatever it is across your portfolio, right? And I think that's interesting to look at. So we'll discuss some other use cases today on the webcast where you have a singular device with the data stream, and now you're using AI and broader analytics, right, to identify signals and drawing conclusions from that. What I find interesting about the hoteling space here and the insurance space and enforcing policies and all that is that you need to combine a variety of techniques and data sources. So when Al talked about enforcing that somebody's wearing a mask versus distance between people, when did they check in and so on, you need vision analytics or image analytics, right, or video analytics, right? You need to identify is somebody wearing a mask through a video stream, while at the same time combining that with distance information that you draw maybe from wearables or other data sources. And at the end, you combine all that and then mirror that against abstract policies that you impose, right? So it might be 2 meters today, it might be 1.5 meters tomorrow, it might be other policies you want to enforce. And I find that really interesting that, you can take use cases like preventing the spread of COVID and keeping people safe today, but you can extend that into other areas and other policy types. And at the end, the AI engine and data processing engine underneath needs to be able to accommodate a variety of use cases and a variety of data sources that might be producing very different types of data, like image or video data versus time series data for a wearable device, for example. And I find that an area, I think, that due to that complexity is definitely growing because technologies obviously have improved. make this easier.
That's a good point. Joseph, any thoughts before we move on to the next section?
Yeah, it's a great topic. You know, when you think about why people I think are embracing AI more and more, because it's a technology that gives people the ability to gain insight, see patterns, and they could then start to predict more accurately. And one of the things that'll be interesting here in this whole notion, Martin and Al, of hoteling is what kind of impact is it actually having on the bottom line for companies? So you think about a big company like Salesforce, you know, CRM, and San Francisco. I believe I just heard that they are going to be letting the majority of their people work remotely. That's a massive, massive undertaking. And that company is all about sales, and they're one of the most successful companies when you think about technology companies in the world. So it'll be interesting to see as more and more companies embrace hoteling, working remotely, and you're seeing a lot of this obviously in Silicon Valley and that whole technology hub. A lot of those companies are doing it. Google, Microsoft, a lot of these companies are doing it now. It'll be interesting to see what kind of impact is hoteling actually having on the bottom line, and is it actually degrading the value that these companies are trying to bring to their clients? Maybe not, but it'll be interesting to see over time what impact is hoteling actually having. But the notion right now is that it's a good thing. I don't think people are generally complaining about working from home. I think they sort of like not having to commute all the time. So it seems like a reasonable ideal given what we're dealing with in terms of COVID. But I think a long-term impact on business is something that people are looking at as well.
That's a great spot for us to now transition to the next piece. Thank you for that, Joseph. A really good point, and I think we do need to start tracking the impact for sure. The second company we're going to take a look at, and I think, Martin, you just alluded to that. It was a great segue. We're talking about wearables and COVID. There is a company that you know in Europe that has adjusted its initial business model, one where they used to use the wearable in the sports industry to now it's a new product that they've developed which addresses COVID in the workplace. Let's take a look at this video and then we'll talk about it.
Ready to start or protect your business amidst the COVID-19 pandemic? One main key is employee safety, as there are many zones where people can run into one another. There are two big challenges: keeping sufficient distance and being able to trace possible chains of infection. Two challenges, one solution: Kinexon Safe Zone. Equipped with an ultra-precise and light ultra-wideband sensor, the Kinexon Safe Tag measures in real time distance and duration of an employee contact up to 10 centimeters or 0.3 feet. If employees are getting too close, the Kinexon Safe Tag immediately sends out a warning. This can happen visually, in case where the distance between employees is too close, or audibly, in case of long-running contact situations. The visual and audible warning signals can be individualized based on distance and time. In case an employee is infected, Kinexon Safe Zone identifies critical contact periods, which helps to enable a fast response. Kinexon Safe Zone in a nutshell.
All right, Martin, you're up. This is an interesting one.
Yeah, so I think I alluded to that a little bit here. What this company represents is this very broad area of wearables, right? So devices, that you obviously wear, and that produce a new data set that you can then use to identify certain things. And Kinexon, in fact, started, as you said, Sam, in the sports industry, and they get, if you're interested in soccer, they got some big attention a couple of years ago when there was a big discussion in Europe around enforcing technology that detects if the soccer ball actually is behind the goal line, or if it's not, right? And in soccer, one has to see one has to understand there is a big a lot of inertia about introducing technologies into the game. Don't want to go into the why that is, but at the end of the day, it was decided a while ago that you want to introduce technology to detect if the ball is behind the goal line. And there were two types of ways you could do that. One is you could have cameras, that detect from different angles, is the ball behind the line or not? And some of you, again, interested in soccer might know the famous Wembley goal in the 60s, when it's still to this day unclear if the ball was during the World Championships behind the line or not. But you could today, with a variety of cameras from different angles, identify is the ball behind or not. The other way to do it is to equip the ball with a little tag, right, that is able to determine its relative position against the goal, right? And this is exactly what now Connexon has done with the safe zone approach, where you now identify the relative position of wearable sensors to each other, right? And the relative position obviously immediately gives you the distance between the tags and therefore the human, right? It gives you the position of the ball on the field, and they also use it to track the players during games, right? Basketball and soccer and so on. And what I found interesting though is that by itself seems pretty simple, right? So you have a device, you tag it on something, and then you get a data stream about locations, right? And you get X, Y, Z. So you get a position, you get all three dimensions of position. What is interesting though is that to actually now convert this into interesting data is not that simple, right? Because you need to make sure this device is extremely low power, right? You cannot, since it needs to be very small, if you want to tag it on a soccer ball, it can only be tiny and very lightweight. So you cannot have big batteries as part of it, right? It needs to be extremely low power in communicating, obviously, and then determining the distance to the next tag. And so there's a big question right now around what technologies do you use for that. Ultra wideband, this is what Connexon uses, versus Bluetooth 5.1, the new standard that's coming out. The iPhone 11 has ultra wideband built in. Not a lot of people know that. And but at the end of the day, so there's a couple of problems you need to solve, right? So how do you create that tag that's low power, extremely lightweight, and is able to produce a data set that you can then use AI for, or advanced analytics, to identify signals that you can then convert into real analytics, like the movements of the players, is the ball behind the goal line, how distant, what is the distance between people, and all that. So there's this analytics component, there's the data generation component, and they somehow need to come together in the cloud, right? Or in a data storage solution where you store the data.
Presumably is what they're doing, right? Yeah. Presumably that's where they're headed, right? So do you think this is something that's going to take a life of its own? I mean, is this viable at this point? I mean, I got to be honest. When I saw that video, and I actually chatted with one of you guys, I'm not going to say who, because I don't want to give you a hard time, but we laughed. We're saying, you know what? If we get too close to people, the battery is going to run out. We're going to get in trouble because we're just natural kind of talkers. We like to connect. How realistic is this to implement in a work environment? I mean, do you think does this have legs, in your opinion?
My opinion is the distance measure. It's not really an interesting use case, right? Long term, right? I think the idea to have very, very simple, cheap, easy to deploy tags that you tag on anything, humans, balls, medical devices, and all that, and identify or track their location indoors or in situations where you cannot rely on GPS. I think that's a very interesting use case and will for sure grow in the future. I mentioned medical devices. It's another use case. You want to track medical devices within in hospitals, for example, and you cannot rely on existing infrastructure, right? You don't want to have devices that you need to connect to the Wi-Fi and whatnot. What you want is a solution that you can easily deploy and that's self-sufficient. I think that's very interesting. And then the infrastructure to analyze the data in the cloud, I mean, that is already there. And we can talk about that forever, obviously, how you could do that with Amazon or Azure and those kind of cloud providers.
Okay. And before we move to the next topic, Joseph, Al, do you have anything to add?
So
No?
I think actually this notion of tiles or tags, rather that are lightweight, is very interesting. And we are seeing the instrumentation of everyday physical objects to actually then drive business decisions. So I think this is absolutely huge. And as we get this vast amount of data that tagging all of these physical objects will generate, we definitely need AI and data science to actually help identify the patterns, as Joseph mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Look, I think whatever we can do to capture data and figure out how best to use that data to help us make better decisions, I think it's a good thing. So nice job, Martin, and sort of giving us a lay of the land on wearables. It makes a lot of sense, and we should do more of this.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Martin. I know this was a great example shared by you as well, so we appreciate that. So we're going to move to another topic, and I didn't see any hands, so we're going to kind of move on to topic number 3, which is looking at an Irvine-based intelligent data management company that's using AI and machine learning to track water usage in real time. Let's take a look, and then we'll talk about it.
Aquatrax, a water tracking solution. Every life on Earth needs water to survive. Unfortunately, on average in the US, 14 to 18% of water, or 6 billion gallons of water, is lost per day. This is the equivalent of $4 billion every year in US and $14 billion globally. There are many challenges keeping us from receiving and understanding information about water loss, such as there is no real-time system for water loss tracking, lack of water budget allocation, lack of customer engagement platform, and list goes on. It is critical to track water supplied versus consumed to identify, measure, and control water loss while allocating personalized water budgets for each connection. To solve these issues, we introduced Trackle, a next-generation cloud-based water loss tracking platform that aids water agencies and its customers to effectively track water use while tracking and reducing non-revenue water. Trackle is highly secured, scalable cloud platform with data analytics, machine learning, and provides powerful data visualizations, optimized for meaningful data output. Trackle integrates seamlessly with all meter, CIS, billing, and payment systems. By its dynamic programming, Aquatrax enables water agencies the ease of tracking water loss, water use, and efficiently achieving water conservation targets while improving customer service engagement.
Now, Joseph, I'm going to send this over to you. I know this is an area that your company is looking at, and I know you guys have been doing quite a bit with the United Nations and the Sustainable Development Goals. Let's talk a little bit about this. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out there, and we'd love to get your impressions on this.
Yeah. So this was a really educational experience for me. When this was sort of pitched my way to take a look at it, I'm going, water conservation. I'm in Southern Orange County, and we're cool with water. What's a big deal? And then I started to do a little research on this, and in all seriousness, it's a really important issue. So I started to do a little research because I wanted to educate myself slightly. Because if you think about people in the Western Hemisphere, Canada, U.S., parts of Europe, think about Switzerland, right? Water conservation is not necessarily top of mind because we have so much of it, generally speaking. But unfortunately, it's those of us that have a lot of it who tend to obviously waste a lot of it. And that's what this little company is all about. And what's interesting, I looked at some baseline statistics, right? So let me give you folks a perspective just so you can sort of appreciate what a company like this is doing. And a lot of other companies, such as like the Gates Foundation, Microsoft in general, a lot of companies are doing work in this area. Did you know that when you look at the total water supply on planet Earth, right, when you subtract 75% of it comes from the ocean, 20-something% of it literally is in glaciers that you can't touch. And then a lot of it is in underground by which you simply can't get access to, particularly if you're in these areas of the world where they're suffering from an industrialization perspective. Literally 1% of our water supply is what they consider fresh, all for the globe. So when you translate that into our population, that's roughly about, so 25% of the world's population is actually struggling with trying to get access to fresh water. It's really amazing. It's really amazing. And so there is this, I think, a very real debate, which I wasn't necessarily fully cognizant of, around is it possible that our demand globally is actually outpacing our supply of water? It's a real legitimate question. I've done a little research on it, and it appears that a lot of scientists believe that's the case. Now, I never really thought about this much because I've always, and rather foolishly, I think, approached it to say, well, you know what, we have what's called these desalination processes where you take seawater and just convert it over to fresh water. What's a big deal? But the problem is if you're in places such as India, Africa, where they are really suffering from water shortage, then you've got to deal with, okay, great, so no problem. Just put in a desalination plant and you're good to go. The problem with that is those plants are super expensive to run. And that process in and of itself, when you start to pull water from the sea, you're actually damaging sea life. And so there's all kinds of ecosystem issues there as well. So this notion that the desalination was something that could somehow remedy the shortage of fresh water is something that somewhat, at least from my perspective, is somewhat of an ignorant notion. So therefore, I think water shortage is something that's really big, and this is a perfect use case for AI, because you can take AI and you can start to apply it relative to how much water is actually being leaked, how much water is actually being used, who actually is getting access to water. So if you have a place that is suffering from water, such as places in India, and you've got these massive populations, and you need to know, based upon how much water they can get access to on a daily basis, is it enough to actually hit their population? What is that, and how's that impacting the population? So this is where you can start picking up patterns and people's behavior and insights. And when you start looking at children that are getting sick and people that are dying, could be largely because of the lack of water. And when you can use AI to start to apply insights as to what that community can do to better use their water to preserve it more and to make it more efficient. So I found this to be a really fascinating use case. Water conservation is a really big deal. I don't think we in the Western Hemisphere really do a good job in doing, and sort of taking the lead to make sure that, given its plentiful supply, that we are acting as responsible grown adults to sort of help do our job in protecting the world. And we have a wonderful tool such as AI that can really help us give tremendous insight. Now, the UN has what's called these 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And really what this is all about is, these are like trying to do what you can for poverty, clean energy, preserving water. There's a variety of different global initiatives they're involved in. And what they like to do, they love to work with companies that are what they call smart tech companies that are using AI. And I can't think of a better example than Aquatrax, because that's exactly what this company is all about. And so one of the things that we've been fortunate enough to do at the UN is that we've set up sort of like these pitching sessions where we actually invite companies that sort of fit that MO to come, and they can sort of pitch their technology. And it's got to be cool technology. You got to use AI, and you got to be able to sort of address at least one SDG. And this is a company that I think we love to probably get in front of that panel, including people like myself, to sort of listen to their pitch and seeing exactly what are they doing to sort of do their part. So I think if you listen to that video, what this company is really all about is they have a web-based platform, they have a mobile app platform, and so when you download their mobile app, which I did this morning, you as a consumer, you can actually take a look at what are you doing relative to how you're using your water. And If you're like me, where you're running a shower probably 2-minute times or what have you, or watering the lawn, we probably don't need to do it, particularly these days where it's kind of cloudy, right? Or we all have our sprinklers going. Then what that's doing is actually showing you how you're using the water, and what their goal is, if you're a consumer, is to help that consumer hopefully adopt better behaviors. Now, where they make their money though is they have an API solution where they sell to businesses, and they integrate their platform into businesses basically from an API integration perspective. And really, how they're selling it to businesses is that we can let you know. It's not so much a telltale like consumers per se, because it's really more generic sort of information. But we can let you know basically this is all largely real time, which is a little unusual for utility companies. Because if you think about it, most utility companies, when they want to find out, Sam, how much water you use for the month, you got the guy who checks your meter.
Right.
Well, guess what? If you're using Aquatrax platform, which is called Trackle.
Yeah.
I think it's Trackle. Yeah. If you're using that, then guess what happens? It'll show you where there's leaks. It'll show you where there's losses. It'll also show you real time how people are actually using their water, and it'll help those utility companies actually do a much better job in terms of trying to hit some of their conservation goals. So anyway, so I'm rattling on here, but I think it's a great solution, and I enjoyed it. But I think it's a wonderful example of how you can use AI to help gain insights, and particularly if you're a utility company, because guess what? There are lots of utility companies, including an electric company, that are looking what people are doing in terms of electric or water, and then they're giving those consumers insights at your bill. So guess what? You can take this platform and you can take their insights that they're getting by use of AI, and their utility companies can feed that insight back to consumers. So it's a great, I think, opportunity for AI. And I've not looked at the company that heavily, but I'd love to get these guys in front of us and let them sort of give their pitch to the group.
Great summary, Joseph, and appreciate the time that you took to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive there. Martin, Al, before we move to the next topic.
What I really like about the use case of water management is that it sort of addresses a variety of needs with the consumer, right? So one thing is, as a society, to save water as a whole. That's a great goal, but we have to somehow incentivize each of us to use the technology and really embrace it to at the end of the day save water. And what I really like about this is that every consumer is deadly afraid of water leaks, right? So you help prevent water leaks. At the same time, you could help save money, right? Get more insight. And at the end, in combination, you might really have people adopt it. Mm-hmm. If you had only either one, I'm not sure if it would drive adoption. But if you have both, right? I mean, I'm afraid of leaks, and I'm also happy about saving some money, right?
Sure.
So I think in combination, it drives enough adoption with consumers, and I fully agree. This sort of water saving analytics. These solutions are absolutely up and coming, right? Because if I look at my house, there's nothing digital about my water, zero, right? I have only a little handle I can turn off and on. That's pretty much it, right? And and I hope I identify the leak early on. Who knows if I do though, right? And I think that's really cool.
Yeah,
definitely.
So there is another product actually. It's Flow by Moen, but it'll actually help you detect leaks. So it'll actually shut off your water for you as soon as it does detect it.
It's LA based, right? Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Nice.
But now it's by Moen.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Good stuff, Al. And any other insights on this, guys, before we move to the next topic? A really good one. I mean, obviously, I think we're all in agreement that we want to conserve more water, even though we may not think about it all the time. I definitely feel that way too. So
real quick, two things I'll leave you with, Sam, and the group here, including the ambassadors. Download the app. I'm not associated with the company, but download the app. I think you'll find it incredibly helpful. From a really, right? And I think any of you just get a chance to just kind of Google what's happening in the world regarding water, and what you'll find is, as it relates to AI, any serious company, whether profit or nonprofit, that's dealing with this issue, they are using AI. So this is a perfect example of why AI is important. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And we're actually going to be excited to track your progress with the UN too, Joseph. So thanks for all you're doing there as well.
You're welcome. I'm usually in trouble with them, so it's okay.
Oh, yeah. You're an innovator. You're a pioneer. That's how it goes, right?
Yeah.
All right. So finally, we're going to take a look at a company based in San Diego. It's called Wise IoT Solutions. Now, they're a healthcare startup, and their mission is to improve patient quality of life by assisting doctors with its AI analytics and remote patient monitoring. Now, the company provides remote, real-time, continuous, long-term heart monitoring that enables early diagnosis, if you can believe it, of heart diseases in a cost-effective manner by automating 14 kinds of arrhythmia detection. I didn't even know that there were that many. Incredible stuff. So we're going to take a look at that, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, Mark, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, remote patient monitoring is again another field that I think is really now ripe for disruption, like the financial services industry, heavily regulated, right? And through that regulation and sort of a very traditional process of like how doctors treat patients and so on. I think the innovation has been driven a lot around large diagnostic systems, like MR and all that, right? And I think what's happening right now is that we see with the availability of wearable devices again, so of sensors that you can stick on people, right, and measure and produce data sets. And Joseph said it's all about creating data sets, that you can use for analysis, obviously. So with the availability of sensors that you can apply to people, to patients, and therefore create data sets that you can use to identify health characteristics, I think that's why there is this breakthrough coming in the industry at large, meaning that now with that data available, you can realize remote patient not only monitoring, but also remote doctor visits and all that, right? So because now doctors would have, in principle, of course, the ability to access your data, add on other data sources about you, like historic data they get from conversations and all that, and really remotely diagnose you in a very holistic way, right? So not only look at your heart rate, your P waves, your QRS signal, and all that, which Wise IoT does, right? So they're trying to identify the signals that are important for heart arrhythmia and all that. But you can take that further and say, hey, with these types of data sets that you gather about the patient, now you can expand that into truly remote diagnosis, right? And remote doctor visits. And I think that comes back to this fact again, that AI today is able to combine a variety of data sources to predict certain things and identify certain things. You still have to train it to identify specific signals, like the P wave, let's say. But you can train. These trainings are relatively simple with today's technology, right? If you know what you're looking for and if you have enough samples, right? And so you can really expand this further and further, identify more and more signals in these data sets, and therefore truly digitize the healthcare process. As I said, regulation is an important topic, right? The HIPAA compliance, for example, so data security and keeping the data confidential and all that, which is for sure a hurdle, especially for startups, right? The cloud providers provide HIPAA compliant services already. So AWS and Azure and so on, they have identified this and said, hey, we want to offer our products into these highly regulated markets. We need to be compliant with HIPAA and PCI for financial services and all that. And but that has already happened. So you can produce cloud systems that are already compliant, and therefore, again, lowering the hurdle for startups entering the space.
I love it, and I'll say this is not new, as you kind of noted. Technology, we know that wearables had kind of come on hard onto the scene and IoT pieces, but I think what you've just uncovered here and is fascinating because it continues to expand. And I wonder, from your view, is it expanding because people are more willing to use these devices than they were maybe before, 10 years ago even? What's your feeling on that?
I mean, for sure, devices have gotten a lot smaller. So I think that's an important piece. And with consumers, it's almost like we just discussed for the water use case. For consumers, it's all about, can you show the value to the person? Do you have the feeling that wearing that device really brings you value? And when in a situation where you're annoyed by the device, right, you still come back to, yeah, but it makes sense. I want to wear this, right? So if it's the situation that you hate to wear it, then you probably won't, right? And I think this is, it has gotten to the point where people are starting to realize, like, maybe, actually, this can obviously prolong my life. It can prevent me from serious situation. I think they have a Wise IoT, for example, has a alert time of like several minutes only. They can automatically call an ambulance and all that, right? So I think that's real value that you bring to the consumer and or the patient. And I think it's always about that, right? Do you feel that there is enough value for you to undergo the hassle of wearing the device? That hassle has also come down with smaller devices, better battery, so that you don't have to charge it all the time and all that. So I think in the culmination of these things it's getting close to this, to a breakthrough, right? Where you're able to actually drive this to widespread market adoption.
I'm going to take a quick question, guys, from one of our attendees who has been doing a bit in the space, Art Robbins. Art, are you there? Great. We can see you on there.
Can you hear me, Sam?
Yes, I can.
Great. Thank you for first of all, thanks to all the panelists. I mean, I think these use cases are fantastic examples of just how, of course, all different industries, AI can be an enabler. And, we've been covering AI and remote work quite a bit at Twimbit. We're a digital content and research company. And one of the things that I'm interested in is the connection of it's getting back to the hoteling and remote work topic. The connection of having an outstanding customer experience as well as creating an outstanding employee experience, because happy employees obviously lead to happy customers, and especially in these challenging times when you can't be in front of the customer, how do you do that? So I'm wondering what are some of the best examples of AI you've seen to enable that outstanding customer experience and outstanding employee experience?
Great question,
Yeah,
Art.
that's a great question. So when you look at AI and by the way, we have two HR professionals from Veritone on the phone with us as well, or in the audience, I should say. And they can probably speak to this better than I can. And I do know that they are looking at leveraging AI throughout the people operations at Veritone. But when you look at AI, in this space, it really allows you to do very interesting things. McKinsey did an awesome article about this, Art, in 2019. And so there's a really good study from there that talks about how AI is used in actually employee experience and customer experience. One of the things that I would look at is how do you actually start measuring, getting a better measurement of employee engagement and starting to recognize when they are starting to be dissatisfied or looking for new challenges. There's a company around called Attune that's actually starting to offer that type of information as dashboard. The other part of it I would ask, or I would share, is that when you're going through this, HR sometimes seems like Big Brother. And so you want to make sure you don't have that connotation as you roll out this type of technology, because that's not really the purpose. The purpose would be more towards how do we actually help people just be awesome at what they do and deliver the best experience to our customers.
And to add to the Big Brother, what I find incredibly interesting is that AI always has the reputation of being that Big Brother, but it is in fact the opposite. You can create AI systems that operate completely without knowing anything about the actual identity of the person, right? And that's what machines can do, right? And last time we talked about the COVID tracking app in Germany, right, where that is completely data secure because the apps themselves don't know anything about the other apps, and your identity is never exposed to any central server. And I find that an important point, right? You can use AI to provide value to a consumer, an employee, a patient, without actually implicating your identity, right? And a human is much harder for a human to provide the same value, but an AI, an automation solution can do that. You can mask the data. You don't have to expose the data to a central server and still perform the analysis and bring the value back to the individual. So I find that an important point about AI, that it's not about Big Brother at all. It's the opposite. It's creating value, or can be the opposite. It's great. You can create value without even disclosing your identity.
Pretty impressive. And I like the idea, like you had said, about decentralizing that, so there is that sense of, I guess, security in your data. And I know, Joseph, that you're no stranger to that area on the privacy side. That's a big one. All right. Well, listen, we've got a few more minutes, and I wanted to kind of give the folks in the audience a chance to raise their hand and ask a final question. But before we completely close out, we want to let you know, first of all, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the speakers who are here today. We really appreciate you guys, as always, sharing your incredible wisdom with us. It has been a very fascinating discussion. I think we can go on for hours and hours with this group, so really appreciate that. One of the things that you may have noticed when you did log into this particular platform is there's a section that enables for networking. So if you did happen to take a seat, we want to let you know that we will keep this platform open for the next 30 minutes for those who are still here and are interested in doing a little bit of networking. Again, this is a new platform that City.AI Orange County is using for the first time, so we appreciate your understanding and any kind of hiccups that we might have had today, but would definitely encourage all of you, those who are interested in staying on a little bit longer and networking with one another, please feel free to do so. This, as we mentioned, is the second of a three-part series. Next month, we are going to be inviting in a lot of these companies, and not necessarily the ones we highlighted today, but others, certainly in Orange County, who are doing some pretty special things with AI and in an effort to keep all of us healthy and safe and really push innovation as we do here in Orange County. So we definitely want to invite you to come back for that. But until next time, thank you all very much. And we look forward to seeing you in a month. Again, please feel free to stay around the network.